Hey, it's Matt Hartnett from Aftershocks TV, and you're experiencing Poppitt's Corner.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Poppitt's Corner, another discussion, another roundtable. Of course, we brought back on the alumni of the show, and of course, Mr. Shannon Fry joins us. How you doing, sir?
I'm good.
And of course, the one and only Mr. Eric Kluber. Gentlemen, thanks so much again for coming on the show and hanging.
Thank you, Tanner.
Well, so before we get started, I'm assuming you guys, you guys are well and doing this crazy time. But we're going to kind of dive deep in the streaming world and the streaming platforms. And my kind of question right off the bat is, we have this kind of I would call it an oversaturation of streaming platforms itself. There's so many of them, and I'm just kind of curious if that hurts, harms, or is a huge kind of benefit to bands in general. So, Shannon, why don't you kind of take it off?
Okay. I will say that first off, it's a benefit. Any music platform that your band or music is streaming on is a plus, no matter what, because somebody out there is eventually going to hear it. Hopefully, they search for your band or whoever's band that they want to listen to be able to find that. But the downside, I think, is that maybe there's not enough exposure to even know what's out there on those streaming platform services. So I think there's a positive and a negative, and I think they weigh out pretty evenly. So I don't know. I'd rather view it on a more positive aspect myself, and just be glad that there's bands music that's out there that's able to be played and you're able to hear it.
Right on.
Go ahead, Eric.
I love it. I don't think there's any negative, to be quite honest. I think it's a step up from where we were with the torrent culture. So we can get into the payment and the breakdowns of all that later. But if you're on one of the streaming platforms, the two big ones, I mean, got to be Spotify and Apple Music. I think the people that I know, that's what they have. And there are others, which I just use Spotify personally. And I just don't see any problem with it. And actually, when bands out of like a moral drive choose not to put their music on those platforms, then I just don't hear it. I'll be looking for it, and it might be 2 songs, which goes by really quick. I like to listen to albums, personally, from start to finish. I just let it go, let it run, and then it ends when it ends. So I think while I understand that they're trying to make a statement, I think they're just shooting themselves in the foot. I don't think they're changing anything. So if you're not on one of these streaming platforms, I think that's a disservice to yourself.
Interesting take or whatever. So I guess let me branch off of this point with you. You say that you personally won't listen to it if it's not actually on that platform, right? But we also have the YouTubes and whatnot that have literally almost everything you can think of.
Yeah,
right?
sometimes you have to. Yeah, sometimes things that are not on those, especially like old thrash albums, will not be on Spotify or Apple Music, and I'll find them on YouTube, and that's cool. But I think if you're not on them, I think you're just making it harder for people.
Well, let me ask you this then, because a lot of these bands don't own their own catalog. A lot of these bands, the label owns it, and the label refuses to put it on. So
I was part of that.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, you are. You still are. It's still not up. I don't think.
I thought the band you're talking. On.
No, I don't think it's on. I mean, you got the Spotify account. You can definitely look it up as we're doing this.
Go ahead and keep going. I'm going to look.
But
still on the camera.
But you guys can branch off of this and whatnot. And a lot of bands kind of don't have that option, I guess is my point, because they don't actually own their own shit because they signed a bad deal and it happens. I mean, far more frequently than I think many of us think, right? So Shannon, for you personally, are you kind of one of these guys that is only a Spotify user, or are you a physical media man, or like what kind of a
Well,
how do you like? Go ahead.
Since I listen to music mostly at my job, I throw on YouTube and YouTube Music and just throw on playlists, find playlists, be surprised what's out there, and that's my personal way. And it just keeps me busy as I'm working. I'm not really searching for new shit all the time. Mostly regurgitating, if you will, what I've already heard in the past of shit that I've already liked anyway. I mean, most of the time, if I'm on Facebook or something, and one of the groups I'm in will post like, check this band out, new album in 2021. I never heard them. Well, I'll go to YouTube or Bandcamp and find them, and if I like them, well, you get 20 seconds, and if not, within that 20 seconds, that's all you get. If I like you, you get more. If not, you're done. I'll move on to the next thing. But and I guess that's the great thing about streaming. You can move on to the next thing, but I try not to. I really try not to. I try to give everything its possible joy, and hopefully I like it. But yeah, YouTube Music is what I mostly use. YouTube and YouTube Music.
Now, do you spend the $10 for the ad free, or
no? I'm a cheap bastard. I just.
I do subscribe to Spotify, so I spend $10 a month for ad free.
Yeah. And so, what's the general consensus? Is it on there?
It is on there, and that's relatively recently. And
wow.
and I remember being on tour and wanting to listen to like one of those records. And if anyone's, I'm talking about White Wizard. I was in this band White Wizard back in 2010, and put out this album Over the Top. And we were looking for like, where is it? It was a big mystery. And then come to find out that Earache had pulled all of White Wizard's catalog. And here's the really shitty thing, is that they pulled live videos, and it was one of my greatest like live videos of all time. I was super proud. We were playing, I think it's called Club Soda in Montreal. It is an amazing video that someone captured. I don't know who, and they took it down. I think it's gone forever, dude. And so like it was like not just the music off like Spotify and Apple Music. It was on YouTube. Yeah, because like Tanner said, they own it. And they were in a dispute, and that was an action they took.
It's just an unfortunate circumstance too, because I would always look for that on Spotify. Could never find it, so I'd have to go onto YouTube. Couldn't find it, and luckily,
they were really strict about it.
Yeah, and luckily, the beauty part is since I own it on physical media, I never have to fucking worry about it. Right? That's the beauty part about owning physical media, is they can't take it away from you. So when people say, "Oh, why do you own physical media?" For that specific reason only, because they can't take it away from me. They can take it away off streaming platforms.
They can at a moment's notice. One thing also about physical, well, I teach guitar. YouTube's pretty good about this, but having the MP3 and then being able to slow it down and listen to, like, you can do that right on YouTube. But if they chose to get rid of it, like Tanner said, you got the music. Also, if you're in a van, like to load up your phone with some physical MP3s, because a lot of time there's no reception. You can't tap into any streaming network because there's no reception, right? So those are good.
And especially if the albums are so obscure, you can't find it on fucking those streaming platforms. So you kind of have to find it on like a YouTube and whatnot, or if you own it, then that's really the only way, unfortunately. And most of these bands will never repress it, or the labels will never repress these things because there's not enough demand for it. So
there's not. They're worth a lot of money. I want everyone to know they're worth a lot of fucking money, way more than I ever thought they would be. It's incredible. A lot of those CDs, we sold a CD for $150 the other day. What fucking CD was it? What CD was it, man?
Holy shit, dude.
I'm not kidding. And that happens, like $50 is a very common price for a lot of death metal, a lot of black metal, just like you said. And there's a collector's portion to it. They're not people. Well, there's thousands of pressings of albums, but a lot of people want the OG pressing, right? Man, and next time we come along, I'm gonna do some research and ask my buddy Jason what that CD was that just sold for $150.
That's insane, dude. That's like, I mean, that's almost like a car payment right there, dude, just for a CD and whatnot. So, I guess my whole thing with the streaming platforms, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm a podcast guy. I'm more than a I mean, I'll listen to music at at home and in my car and whatnot, but I just my podcasts get me through the day, and I just learned a little bit something new. And I'm not gonna lie, I listen to my own sometimes. That if I want to repeat an episode we did, or wanted to go back and hear one from years ago, and just kind of see where I was at then, I'll do that, right? So, and most
I
of
can't
these,
do that, man. I can't listen to my own podcasts.
really,
Yeah, it's very difficult. I'm also like that with live footage a lot of times. And then if I finally like work up the nerve to watch it and I like it, then I might, oh yeah, that was cool. But
well, and then it gives back some memories, unless Eric takes it down, of course. But Shan, let's or actually, Eric, let's get to you real quick.
what's up?
Your vision of this episode, we wanted to branch upon the Spotify things, and I'm just I think that having Spotify, while it is totally beneficial and whatnot, and it gives power, I guess, back to the bands as well to an extent. But the breakdown of the prices, depending on if you own your own stuff, that's how much money you're going to be making if you own your own masters and whatnot. And most of the bands that are kind of bitching about, I only get 0.00067 cents, are people that made, they signed shitty deals that prevent them from obtaining royalties. And it's just, it is what it is, man. But what are your thoughts on that?
My thought, well, exactly what you're saying, just to, if anybody doesn't know, a lot of bands, like a record deal usually is like 8%. It's 8 cents on the dollar. That's what the band makes. Now that can change. Things have changed a lot, but if it was like an old school deal, that's what bands would get. So Spotify and streaming is already very low. So imagine getting 8% of that, which the band has then they might have a manager that gets a portion of that. I mean, the pie just keeps getting cut and cut and cut. So I think a lot of the horror stories that you're hearing that seem so unfair, I think that's the scenario. And I own some of like my independent bands from like the early 2000s, like we owned all our stuff. And the Spotify, from what I see, and it's interesting that sometimes it varies. Like sometimes the numbers will change. Like, why did that change there? But it's usually what is it? 0.03. It's a third of a cent. So 3 plays you'll earn a cent. That's kind of the standard that I see in the pay, which I actually don't think. I mean, that's not highway robbery. I mean, I think unfortunately what we're all bitching about is that we don't get enough streams, right? That would be. It will take literally millions upon millions of streams to start to get some adult money or something that you could use. So that's a reality. But one also kind of cool thing is it's you look at the long game. I mean, it's going to continue to do that, assuming people continue to listen to your music. So it's not a one and done. So and one other thing is that there are so many platforms. So when people, it's not like all of a band's streaming revenue is just from Spotify. That's one. And then you got the Apple, and then let's just call all the others. YouTube is really low from what I see. And this is through CD Baby, when I'm looking through and like what the streaming revenue is. And YouTube's really low. Like, I feel like YouTube, it's the lowest, man. I should have printed out
research. But I think it gives power back to the bands with these streaming platforms. So there's not a monopoly. There's not like one MTV where it only plays certain videos that labels bought on to, right? So it gives power.
Airwaves.
Yeah, it gives bands more power, but at the same time, it's so oversaturated that it's like, that could be a huge a negative to bands too, because there's just so much stuff. You know what I mean?
what you're saying is maybe since there's so many bands, the chances of someone listening to your stuff repeatedly is less because they listen to you once and then they move on. I can see that.
Yeah, like how Shannon said, 20 seconds, you're done, right? As to quote him, but he's absolutely right, dude. I most of us have the attention span of 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds tops, dude, right? And then we have such a short attention span that, yeah, depends on the individual for sure.
Hey, real quick, I texted my buddy and I asked him what that CD was. Possessed, 7 Churches.
Holy shit! But the original, right?
Original.
Yeah.
Is this a vinyl or a
No,
CD?
it's a CD.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
Because I own the original vinyl. I can probably sell it for like
dude, that might
$300. And
yes, we could if you want.
it was given to me for free as a gift,
awesome.
so I'm never giving it away to anybody else. But my point is again, some of these stream platforms might not even have that specific album. You know what I mean? They depending on who owns it. So it's just impaired. I always encourage people to get physical media due to that reason. If there's most of the technical thrash metal bands that I love aren't on Spotify. I have to have it on CD.
Yeah. Oh shit. Sometimes with all these different platforms, you're at the mercy of whatever you're listening. If I'm at my buddy's place, he has Apple Music, right? He doesn't have Spotify. I guess he could download the free version or something. Everybody has YouTube. But I think I was like cleaning my sister's basement years ago and she had an Alexa. So I was like, hey, Alexa. And I was having fun just like fucking with it and asking it to play music. And I think in that case, it all has to be on Amazon's fucking platform, which is interesting because some things are free on Amazon's platform for anybody. And some of it's like, I don't know, you have to be part of, they have their own platform, like, and you have to be a $10 a month. So, I mean, I think it's good to have it on everything because you never know what people are listening to at that moment.
True. And I'm going to branch off this because I keep getting asked this specific question regarding my specific band in question. And everyone keeps asking me why a certain record isn't on, Spotify or this, that, and the other. And the reason for it is because it's getting reissued. So like I'm trying to wait until the fucking thing gets, announced properly and pre-orders start and it gets released so I can re-release the remaster and whatnot. So that, bands just do that as well for these platforms. They take off their own albums and put it back on once it gets reissued. And that's perfectly fine too.
I got to throw something in there. If you listen to Spotify and you listen to Megadeth, you only get to hear the remasters. That's fucked up because they did like a recent whatever release of Killing Is My Business, which I think I think it's difficult, but regardless, I mean, yeah, the remasters of So Far So Good So What, Peace, I fucking can't stand them. I wanted to call it Holy Wars, Rest in Peace, I don't
that's
like
the worst one, dude. That's like was literally like re-recorded, wasn't it? And the new Killing Is My Business, a lot of the tracks were re-recorded too. That shitty These Boots cover, that was re-recorded.
Are you talking vocally?
Yes, it's awful,
I noticed a lot of the vocal which I agree. That really bums me out. So that's kind of a fucked up thing. That's like kind of a big a vote for owning the original. Right, of a lot of things. It's not just Megadeth, but that like comes to mind. Like when you hear it on Spotify, you're not hearing the OG mixes and shit.
Well, you think with a record as iconic as Rust in Peace that they wouldn't fuck it up, but they somehow managed to do that. So yeah, but it replaces that said version, and it's so again, it depends who owns it. So it depends what album it is and who owns it. Like here, perfect example, dude. Like not all of this band's music is on Spotify, right? Like I literally have to own it on a physical format in order for me to listen to it. Believer or only certain albums from that band are on it because they signed a deal back in the 90s or 80s, whatever it was, and that record label is defunct and there's no way of getting those rights back. So it just depends on the band and the platforms. And again, I still feel there's a need to own physical media, and that's a huge reason why I own it.
I think I hope I'm not bogarting any of the space, but real quickly, there are collectors out there. You know, it's like I feel like normies, civilians, whatever you want to call them, that's all for streaming, and they're not going to buy a CD or a vinyl, etc. Because they'd be like, why would I? It just makes no sense. But I think what you want is you want the music collectors to buy your shit and listen to you on streaming. And I don't think you're ever going to convince. I mean, it's just a culture. It could become a trend, just like vinyl picked up, right? Like, why the fuck would you own a vinyl in 2021, right? Well, a lot of people do, and it became a thing, and it's actually blowing up, and that could happen again. So, but I don't think that strong arm tactics are going to I don't think you can force people to buy the physical. I feel like maybe a few, like you just gave an example of, if you want this record, you have to buy it. I think by and large, if someone's going to buy it, they're going to buy it, you know, and there's no like trick to make them do so.
So, but let me branch off of this. You know, you said, you know, the vinyl thing. I think people like the vinyl thing because it brings them closer to experiencing music again. Do you know what I mean? Like streaming kind of takes you away out of it. It's background noise to me. Streaming to me is background noise. Owning a physical product or whatever, or vinyl or CD, it makes me feel like I own a piece of that history. It makes me feel like I own that, you know, I own a piece of that album, and that album is mine. So it's like it makes me more engaging with the music. It's like why people go to the movie theater still, right? They go to it because they want that experience of fucking going to the movies, not because the movie at hand or whatever. They want to be closer to that movie, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, it's totally valid point. Absolutely agree.
So, you know, and again, you guys are definitely right about, you know, there's more good that comes out of streaming than not. It's just I'm not that kind of music fan, and I get it. Not everybody is like myself, and you kind of have to. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
It's not very sexy. Streaming is not sexy. Owning the record is sexy as hell. You know, so it depends on how far you take your music.
That might be the name of this episode now. Thanks, dude. You know?
Streaming is not sexy.
Streaming is not sexy, dude. Shit, we've been discussing too much.
No, you've been fine. But I wanted to bring up something about the physical product. Like, even though collectors like the physical product, nowadays they're starting to make cars with no more CD players. No more, of course, no more cassette players, but no more CD players anymore. So everything's being pushed to streaming. I think that's where everything's headed. And you're right about the owning the vinyl, like, because when you're a kid and that's the first thing that you have, like in my case, and you're able to put that needle on and hear the
yeah.
and hear it for real, hear it, and look at the cover, look at the back, look at the liner notes in it, look at the thanks list, the lyrics, the photo collages they put in. You know, I mean, there's an experience behind that, but I hope more than that catches back on. You know, I mean, there is cassette tapes being reissued again, and CDs are going to come back again as they are, but I don't know. I think maybe that would be the best of both worlds. However, everything just seems to be pushed towards streaming.
It's a great point, and I'm kind of almost curious what's next after streaming, because you know we had all the CDs
Then you get
and
the thing you get a computer chip put in your head, and that's where it's at.
Can you imagine anything you think of? It's right there.
Yeah, right there.
That's a scary thought.
Elon Musk, there was a YouTube about him saying that exact thing, that like our methods of communication from typing and texting are too slow. Like if we had just a chip in us that would just like zoop, it would be more instantaneous, more productive.
I don't think I would want that. I don't think I would cave to doing that, you know.
Yeah.
I know most people would, but I don't know if I could find myself doing that, you know.
But here's something else I want to bring up. Do you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I believe it was 2 years ago, might have been last year. Anyway, the CEO of Spotify saying how bands need to hurry up and
Yeah,
make more in order to keep themselves relevant
yeah,
on the streaming platforms. I mean, he was preferring to Spotify himself, but in a general aspect, like every 6 months to release an album, are you out of your mind?
yeah. It's. I feel like it's harder to release. It's harder to get together as a band. I think life is harder for musicians now. Whereas back in the day, I mean, somehow those bands did seem to have quite the schedule. I don't know if it was every 6 months, but I think there were a few bands that did do that, at least on a couple record cycles. But yeah, I think that's pretty unrealistic. I think you can do that with podcasts, but God, man, I don't know if people realize what it takes to write a song, much less record it, much less get the packaging all together, you know.
And be happy with it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I
all
think
of it takes, all of it needs its own time to bake. It's like baking a cake, right? It's like not you don't just throw in every ingredient and then a
Right.
cake pops out. It's
Right.
not the fucking Sims where you fucking it just magically just appears like that. It takes time to perfect that craft and whatnot. And it's like being a carpenter and wanting a chair made every 2 minutes. It ain't gonna happen. You know what I mean? It's just it takes time to do, or a cabinet, whatever it is. So
You're at a house, what have you.
yeah.
Like, I think that was just an ignorant statement. I think that was just stupidity.
Well, I think there are some valid points to what he's saying, because everybody's attention span is so non-existent anymore. So that could be why he was saying it. But also, too, that guy I don't think he's ever written a song in his life. So he
I highly doubt it.
and I'm not trying to bag too much on that, ignorant kind of thinking, but I just think that, if you don't really have skin in the game as far as that goes, I mean, don't really say it. But let's kind of branch off here and go to where it's, obviously, the video aspect I would like to kind of touch upon with these streaming platforms, because obviously, Joe Rogan, Spotify thing, there's videos up now. And so I'm thinking that most places are now going to have the video aspect, and like podcasts are going to start becoming what music is. And do you know what I mean? So like,
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I don't know if it's healthy, but I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. And there's only so much time in the day. And I think a lot of my listening time is more than ever devoted to podcasts instead of just music.
I'm wondering why that is. Just because you learn more new things, and you just like hearing people talk, and like myself, or like, you know what I mean? Where like you like kind of, I don't know, you drive in your car, you don't want to feel alone driving in the car, so it's just nice to hear people's voices. Or
Sometimes,
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think. Like, if I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to podcasts as well. And it's to get more of it, to get an insight on what other people think about certain topics that I'm thinking that might be or might not be cool in their eyes. Just it's kind of a like an opening the mind to hear other opinions. Most of them are wrong, but
it also depends on how good the host is too. Let's be completely honest here, and
Yeah.
saying that it also depends, how the host's voice sounds, or how he articulates his questions, or what type of questions he asks, what his a set agenda is, or his or hers. It depends, all that stuff when it comes to podcasts for me.
Is that person exciting? That's the main thing. Is that person exciting, or is he Ben Stein?
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, there's a lot of different attitudes and personalities. Like, I don't think everybody has to be over the top to be entertaining. I do think that a good podcast does have good direction, so if someone stalls out, they can pick up the ball. I mean, a lot of these guys, a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, the dude's side job is being a comedian. So those guys have the gift of gab, and they're super sharp and super fast. They're able to talk about anything and make it interesting. A podcast, are super. I've learned so much, and then I've been able. They're specialized. There's so many. I've been able to like find podcasts that are like in my world, shit that I like. But I will say this: I actually kind of go out of my way to not listen to too many. I think maybe it's unhealthy and weird. Like I'm like, dude, you're a musician, man. Like, don't be listening. Like, listen to fucking more music, dude. Like that's like your vitamins. So I think it's healthy to not let that overtake all of your time.
It's making it a perfect balance.
Yeah.
I think that because it's okay. Case in point, I'm really into music. Like music is literally my life here. So I like listening to a lot of music podcasts and learning about certain albums or certain people, certain bands. And I've kind of translated that into what I do now. And that's the kind of information that I want to know as a music fan and whatnot, and apply that to the rest of the world. So and also in saying that, I like the fact that I don't have to get up and change the album every 20 or 30 or 40 minutes. I can just listen to an hour or 2 hour podcast, and especially if it's really interesting, it goes by really quick. Especially if it's entertaining or there's new information, and that's what the goal of that specific podcast is to educate us. It doesn't necessarily have to entertain me. It kind of necessarily just has to educate me on things that like I'm generally curious and interested on, and that would primarily be music related podcasts. So that's why I'm saying I listen to a lot of those kind of podcasts.
I get it. Well, real quick, I can't stand silence ever. So that I need either music or podcasts or even the fucking TV going on in the background. So yeah, it's is that once again, is that really healthy? I'm not sure, but that's how I've evolved in our society. It's really weird. Like actually time just slows, and if I'm doing it, a lot of the shit's done at work. So if I'm at work, the time goes slower. I need to be fucking listening to something, dude. So
can I ask you both this question? Primarily, particularly pertaining to your guys' respective bands, how has streaming made you guys more relevant or kept you relevant in a time where we don't really release music every 6 months, quote unquote, right? But how has streaming kept the flame going for your respected bands?
I'll answer first. It hasn't. It hasn't.
I love it.
I don't search for my band on Spotify or any of the streaming services. I really don't listen to my own band much right now anymore anyway, except because when we're practicing, I get to hear it as much as I want. But since my band disbanded the last time until now, like that whole streaming platform has sprung up. So I mean, but kind of right at the time that the band was separating, the internet radio thing was the big thing before the streaming, right? The internet radio. I guess it's the same thing as streaming. But Joe Schmo has his own radio show,
Yeah.
Empty Cranium Radio, right? Empty Cranium. So for me myself, what I'm getting at is I haven't really experienced anything positive or negative concerning that with my own band. But when you're talking to people about your band or about my band, and the first thing they ask, "Are you on Spotify?" Well, yeah, of course. We're on all of them. Just look.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, yeah, it has helped. But then again, I kind of, I don't know. It's there, I guess, but it hasn't affected me whatsoever.
Right.
Same question for you, Eric. Especially since you guys are playing live all the time now. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and I hate to get obsessed like with the numbers, but one thing that we haven't really talked about that is beneficial for bands is that if you have a lot of numbers that are real, and I think I think they're taking steps to get rid of like fraudulent paid plays, etc. But anyway, people take that shit really seriously. So if your band has stats, basically, I know it sounds so shallow, but it's a reality. Like if you have, they call it followers on Spotify, which I think people just click and follow your band, so it's in their library. And then you're just raw numbers, and we talk about those on YouTube as well. It's like you judge a video before you even watch it sometimes by how many views it has, which once again is that right, but it's just reality. So that is also a benefit of people listening to you on those platforms. And it's interesting. I wonder if there's a lot of heavy metal bands that look like they don't have much much interest because their fans are listening to it on vinyl and CD, and the numbers aren't getting recorded. I mean, it's just kind of funny. That could be really happening.
That's a great point. Not everybody listens to fucking Spotify. I know it may seem like that, but not everybody does. I never listen to those fucking platforms ever. I'm usually that physical media guy or a podcast guy. So, but I want to go off of this point. You mentioned radio, and I'm just kind of curious how much of new radio stations, how much does that actually play into people discovering new music nowadays? Like radio. I'm not talking podcast, what we do here. I'm talking radio, where they play bands, and especially new bands on the internet and whatnot, because there's so many of those, there's so many like internet radio stations out there. I'm just kind of curious how much of that actually plays a part in people discovering new bands.
That is a good question.
And what demographic does that pertain to nowadays? I don't know.
But you would know more than any of us. Because you're on Razor Radio. And I think, that's a platform that typically I don't listen to. I go to a streaming platform or the YouTube or my own CD collection, what have you. And that's how I get my musical intake, It's just like if you watch a movie, do you watch it on Netflix or do you watch it on HBO Max? You're still watching the movie. Which way do you do it?
Or do you own it?
or do you own it, man? Right. So, but like, I think everything can be super valid. Like if a radio show is awesome with great hosts that connect with people, that could be incredible. I'm just a little bit ignorant on the topic because that's not how I get my music.
The big problem is there's not a Casey Kasem of metal.
Right? Dude, that's a great point. He was like an American icon. I remember his voice, and he was just like it was Americana, And I guess we need our Casey Kasem of metal, right?
I always think of Shaggy from fucking Scooby-Doo every time I hear his name, so I can't unhear that, But
I love Scooby-Doo too.
Yeah, I'm a Scooby-Doo fanatic. Love it. But so case in point with these, I generally think after our discussion and whatnot, that streaming platforms are hugely beneficial. Obviously, there's no question on that, especially with underground bands. But there's just so many of them on that platform that it's hard to market yourself properly and get a new audience on it. But a lot of people discover new bands on there, like Shannon said, on playlists and people taking the time. Like, dude, a case in point, dude, when I again, all I can do is relate to what I've experienced. So with Madras, we released the latest record, and that started getting on more playlists and people's. It was like kind of an organic way of other people discovering music through our fans putting it on playlists, and so that was hugely beneficial to making the band grow. And I'm assuming it's like that with all of us, where our fans are just so passionate, they'll make a playlist and then people start following their playlist.
I like to think so. I mean, that's the dream, right?
But it happens. It's like it's all about marketing, and unfortunately, Spotify isn't everything. I don't want to make it seem like that's the end all be all with music, because most people, everybody has their own way of listening to music.
Yeah, more than ever. Because like back in the day, you didn't you had a couple of options. It was either radio or maybe a television, like the midnight special, right? That's few and far between, or like, physical media. But yeah, now there's just so many. I think every single platform is valid. For me, Spotify, I don't use it to find new music ever. It's still, for me, it's still old school. And this is what I mean. If my buddy talks about a band, I'll listen to it, Oh, turn it on. Like, we'll just get into a conversation. We talk music all the time. Oh, let's put on that Possessed album, even though that's an older band. I haven't listened to that album in 10 years, et cetera, but it's still just like, it's a buzz. Like, that's a natural organic buzz of just hanging out with friends. It comes up in the conversation. Oh, and that is what I like about streaming. Like, we just talked about this 1 second ago. It's on my mind. I got that impulse, boom, in whatever platform I choose. I think that's how I do it. So it's like, what you're looking for, and you physically type it in down to the fucking song if that need.
I like it. Gentlemen. And lastly, any other thoughts on this topic? Do you guys foresee a future where we might not have streaming anymore? Streaming might be what radio has become. I could totally foresee that now.
I don't see that happening. I think that's as far as it's ever going to go. I seriously think so, because it's the last, you have 5 senses. Only one of those senses is music. Seriously, only one of those senses is music, hearing. So unless the implant chip gets put in your head or wherever on your body, if that was to happen, and that's the next evolution of this, then that would probably be the only way to go. But I think this streaming thing is where it's at. I think you've reached the
end.
The end of the end.
Could be. I follow what you're saying. My only thing about streaming and anything that's digital and virtual is that it can all be taken away like that. It can just vanish. And it's literally a flick of a button. It's just on, off. So that's where things could change. I mean, if all of a sudden they get some sort of laws passed, it could be censorship, or it could just be like royalty disagreements, and it can just all be taken away. So that's when streaming, if it gets turned off, it wouldn't be viable. And it's always, that's what I don't like. Yeah, it
wouldn't be the end of the world.
It wouldn't, so, and that's the other thing. I think that maybe what we're, I don't get too worked up about how things are right now, like whether or not. Okay, yes, I do get worked up, but I've got peanut gallery over here talking shit to me. But God damn it up! Like, you just beeline me. Fuck, what was I talking about? Motherfuckers were talking about.
Well, so if this is the end of if this is indeed the end of the line, as far as how music will kind of get discovered and listened to, all the I don't know, man. I kind of disagree with this. I think something will come eventually that'll replace it. It's always kind of happened. Radio was first, and television, and
that's
so I don't know what it is. I'm just saying I think something might come, within, I don't know, 30, 40 years, we'll say. So, and it's, and I got to branch off at this point too. It's, I think it's so fascinating and just so cool that a lot of us are so stubborn where we won't give up buying physical media, because it's still viable. It's still important.
It's just metal.
It still means something to us fans that want to own a piece of something that honestly somebody else can't take away from you ever. And Eric kind of cemented that theory in the beginning when you talked about a label taking bands off of a platform, and they get are the end all be all when it comes to what they own. So it's imperative that you own your own shit
if you can. And things can go back and forth. Like I remember I was talking about where things are right now as far as royalties. Let's just leave it at that. That could change in a year. It could change in 5 years. It could become more fair. It could become way worse. It could be zero again. So, I mean, radio could become relevant again. If it just anything that's exciting, like all these things are relevant on their own. And the other thing is, like, I typically, when I listen to podcasts, I don't watch the video, but that's a big part of it now. I do not watch the video usually. It's just on in the background, you know. Just audible. That's all I care about. So so that's cool. It's an option, but like for me, I could take it or leave it because I'm just listening.
I love it. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you again for doing this with me, and let's keep. I mean, let's keep coming back on, and let's fucking do more of these, and think of some more topics, and start discussing a little bit more, and making this community a little bit more healthy. I think we've all been kind of living in this bubble where it's me versus you, and it just doesn't need to be like that anymore. So let's keep the discussions coming when it comes to music and what our thoughts are. And just, I always appreciate you guys give me a few minutes of your time. But before we get out of here, give me your links.
You can find us on Facebook and Bandcamp, Avenger of Blood.
All your platforms, look for Void Vader. It's VOID. Second word, VATOR. Void Vader.
Absolutely. And of course, you can find Madross on all those streaming platforms and whatnot too. And for another episode of Poppitt's Corner, guys, we're out of here. Cheers.